welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed. And we have a new text today. We are reading the Meno, and there's a title for this too. The Meno, can virtue be taught? This text we're moving into, we have Even in Brooklyn. Yes, thank you for joining us in the chat. And anybody watching on YouTube, you're welcome to follow us live on YouTube or sign into Twitch and follow me on Twitch. And if you'd like to follow on the Discord, we send notifications to people in the Discord when we're going to go live for streaming, so you can join in real time. Of course, you can send messages in the comment section of YouTube if you would like to. Now, how do we get to the Meno? Well, we have been reading the Phaedo. And after reading through it once, we discovered, hang on a second, Socrates is telling us we need to read it a second time in a new way. And he outlined the stakes. There's a character in the text who only read in the first kind of way, and he was really thrown off his game when somebody presented an opinion that was familiar to his religious mythology. All of a sudden, in simply trusting and remembering the Logos, it wasn't sufficient for him to hold on to the truth about the soul, the meaning of life, and reincarnation. Socrates went on to say, hey, you have to start by trusting and repeating the Logos, of course, but if you stay there, then you know what? The world is full of scam artists and con artists. And if they push the right button in you, if they use a theory or an argument style that's familiar to your mythology, then you might end up not only with a false belief, but you may end up even hating the Logos itself, which is the greatest defect you can have in the soul. Why? Because you will not reach truth and true being. Wow. So we had to read it a second time. But I thought, and what's the new way we have to read the text according to Socrates? Well, we discovered that's the study and exercise, the self-study and exercise of philosophy, the dialectic. We have to go through and apply the dialectic to our thinking, to our reading. Look for it as much as possible, apply it as much as possible, practice it as much as possible. That's our gateway into ousia, nous, the direct experience of that realm of pure being, the realm that we should be doing a dialectic on as we read, because he gives us some bits of information about it. He says it's true, it's eternal, it's immortal, it's deathless, it's the source of knowledge. There's the hyparxis of ousia in being. And this is why we read. We read because Socrates is presenting us the information about reality, the Logos. But as any good teacher, he does it in a certain kind of way where you have to put the pieces of the puzzle together yourself. You have to play the game, like any good video game. In fact, Socrates says explicitly, I'm Ionius, I think the guy's name is Hercules' assistant. You are Hercules. You are the true hero. This is for you. That's why in this channel we have to have our nose in a text that reflects the Logos. What's the Logos? Well, that's one of our questions. In all of the different texts we read on this channel, we're looking for the Logos. We read them to understand the Logos. We're here to discover the Logos and apply it in the different ways. So when we read Socrates, we are reading the Logos about reality, our highest goals. When we read philosophical midwifery, we're discovering the same Logos, but we apply it to our problems. to purify ourselves from the cause of the problems we live out in our lives. When we read the Logos in the sense of music, we're discovering the Logos reflected one dimension down into the patterns of the physical world. And we apply it to music, to understand music, to appreciate music, to play music if you like to play music, or you want to pick up an instrument and start to play. So the Logos is the same, but it's reflected into different areas, and we apply it in different areas in how we read. And at the moment, we have the three categories. We have Socrates, the Logos in its purest form. We have philosophical midwifery, the new paradigm for understanding human problems. And we have Zucker Kundl's The Sense of Music. Those are the three we're working with. But of course, we can pick up a few more as we go. There is a book I'm really excited to get into when we have the space for it. Jesus and Socrates, a dialogue in heaven. Oh my goodness. That book is amazing. That reflects the Logos. There are other texts by Dr. Pierre Grimes that reflect the Logos. There's, after music, we could get into math, Euclidean geometry, see if we can discover the Logos in that. But for the moment, having three on the go is fine. So, what are we doing in the top one? The ideal. Well, we were reading the Phaedo. We have to go through and apply the dialectic. That seems to be key to this whole mastery of the art of the Logos. Now, of course, we have a question. What is art? That's a big one. We're carrying that as we go. Because in the Phaedo, Socrates says you have to master the art. There's the art of the Logos. And hey, the problems aren't because of people. The problems aren't because of our reality is bad or not rational. No. That you have your problems because you lack the art. You were not judging people. You were not judging arguments with the art of the Logos. That's where the blame lies for problems. So, our job is to pick up the art of the Logos and master it. So our questions are, what the heck is an art? What does it mean to master it? And what is this Logos? Of course, we're carrying these. And as we know, as we read, our job is to gather questions as it's shared in chat. Yes, the Logos is about questions. Questions give you a puzzle to solve. It makes the activity come to life. If you don't have a question, then nothing's on the board. You don't have an open, curious state of mind, but you're not looking to solve something. There's no game there. Doesn't matter if it takes you 10, 20 years, maybe even lifetimes to solve a question. Having a question, carrying it, keeps that game alive, keeps you looking for bits, keeps you building, waiting to solve that puzzle. We look for questions and carry them with us. That's the game. So we have those questions we're carrying with us. But we have another question, which is what has led us into the Meno. Yes, we have to read the Phaedo again, in this new kind of a way, with the dialectic, but we can take a pause to see if we can learn more about the dialectic in other texts to level up before we return. Just like in a video game, you might have a level that's quite high. You might have to do some side quests first to level up, to bring the skills with you to apply it to that higher level. We can do that. But also in the Discord, we've been getting questions. What is it like? What does it mean to live the philosophical life? What does it mean to be a good person? There's been talk about ethics and morality. How can we know that we are being philosophers? How do we know we're on the right track? Well, this is a good question. This is an important question because this is a question we can carry with us as we read. We want to know that we're reading well. Should we even be reading? What's the point of wasting our time? Well, is it a waste? Are we wasting our time by reading Socrates? Hey, at school, they told us he stunk. He had this crazy idea of abstract ideas, like the ideal table, the form of table. And he was stupid. So they tell you at school. And he's old as well. So we like the modern philosophers. Forget it's the height of absurdity or intellectual absurdity to take on Socrates as a guide for true morality and the right way to live. So are we wasting our time? Now, those familiar with the Phaedo will recognize that those arguments are very stupid. He didn't think that, and just because we ignored what he said doesn't make him wrong. In fact, it's very important that we pick up where we left off. But how do we do that? How do we know we're reading well? Because at school, they tell us, hey, it's important to read as many books as possible so you can pull out a bunch of quotes and use them in arguments to win debates, right? Isn't that everything I see on YouTube related to philosophy? People throwing out opinions, quotes, to back up their own personal opinions? How many people can you quote to win debates, right? Is that reading? Makes you sound really sure of yourself, really certain, really confident. You've got it all figured out because look at all these books. And hey, audience, you've never read those books, so you have no right to question my beliefs and opinions. I win. That's how you read. That's why you read. Hey, any field. You can't know anything about politics. You can't know anything about law. You can't know anything about economics. These are very complicated things. You have to read 1 million books before you can have an opinion that's justified. That's our whole system. It's a good way of gatekeeping, and it's a good way of pretending what can be understood simply and easily by anyone with an open mind. It's a good way of gatekeeping. It's a good way of lying to us that that is actually not the case. You can't understand because look at these complicated words that we have. You have to go to school for 10 years before you can have an opinion. It's a good way of keeping the status quo the way it is and silencing the majority so the minority can abuse, manipulate, exploit through capitalism, through war, through all of the systems of exploitation we have. But hey, you can't have an opinion because that's only for us. Baloney. That's one of the problems with opinion. If opinion is what makes something right, then how do you make your opinion the correct one? War or gatekeeping in this kind of a way. You have to study law for 15 years before you can have an opinion. Well, what if it wasn't about opinions, but understanding? What if you haven't understood unless you can make it clear for everyone? What if everyone can participate in understanding? What if the principles can be made simple and clear? The principles of economics, politics, law, all of the things that we are suffering injustices in. I mean, you only have to turn on a good YouTube channel and you've got some 20-year-old person outlining very simply and clearly the problems of our economic system, our legal system, capitalism. I mean, everybody's talking about how inherently terrible and exploitative capitalism is. and they don't have any degrees, everyone can see it. And also the fact that these problems can be solved very simply if we take part in and value reason. If we seek to understand and solve problems, they can be done very easily, and the unnecessary genocides, exploitation, destruction of the planet, wage slavery, hoarding of wealth, lying on television by people claiming to be news networks, these can be addressed very, very, very quickly and simply. What's the difference? Understanding. So how do we get that? How do we understand? How do we read? Why should we read? These are questions that come up for us while we discover the paradigm of understanding, the model of understanding, the logos. How do we play this game we're in well? So that's a good question, and it's worth taking a pause from our reading of the Phaedo and the other text to really wonder about that question, to build up that question, to make it something bright and shiny and important that we can carry with us, because it's a damn good one. And we are going to be reading, so wouldn't we want to know how to read well? Do we read so we can act certain and confident and shut down opinions? Do we read so we can somehow hoard power and lie to people on television to maintain our personal wealth? Is that what reading is about? Do we read so we can, be a pick-me? Recognize the systems are inherently exploitive, but not me. Maybe I can benefit. Maybe I can get my few dollars by being a cog in that system. Is that why we read? That seems to be what education is based on. Getting a degree in this corrupt system, so hey, you can make a buck or two while maintaining this status quo that is based on fundamental inequality, ignorance in opinions rather than truth in understanding, which is universal to all. Well, obviously it's not that. And if we're practicing a dialectic, we can put all of those sorts of things inside B. What isn't true? So we have a question, okay, if that's injustice, if that kind of way of reading, of exploring, of being a human being, of living our lives, if that's injustice, if that's vice, well, what's the opposite? What's virtue? Good question. Let's see if we can really make that question big for us. Let's see if we can, in reading the Meno, get that question stuck in our soul. Because that's the question asked of Socrates in the Meno. Meno asks this question. He asks a question about virtue. Specifically, can it be taught? Why are we going to this trouble? It's not really trouble, it's fun. It's the best game in town. It's awesome. This is so much fun and meaningful and significant, and it has a direct impact on our lives. And it's great to have these questions to wonder about as we walk through our days and to explore the true nature of our minds, the true nature of psychotherapy, the true nature of reality, the true nature of music. These are all very, very cool and exciting things. It's good conversation with your friends over coffee. But if we're learning about the right way of being, the way that aligns us with our destiny and frees us from our chains of fate, ignorance, and suffering, if that's what we're reading to discover, then are we wasting our time if virtue can't even be taught? You either have it or you don't? That's kind of a common opinion. When you ask someone if they have virtue, or if they are a good person, they'll say yeah, and you'll say, well, okay, where did you learn what it means to be a good person? Where did you discover the understanding or knowledge or even wisdom of what is good to say that you have the good applied to your soul. And they'll reply, oh, you just know. It's common sense. Well, who was your teacher? Oh, you don't have a teacher. You're kind of born with it. It's an inner sense. You can't teach virtue. There's no reason to learn. You philosophers are wasting your time with your book learning. Just common sense, right? I vote for Trump because he seems to speak common sense, says 40% of the American population. Hang on a second. Something's not adding up here. So I hope these are bits of information that can add to your wonder about virtue, what it is, if we're doing it, and how we can do it, or if it can be taught at all. And hey, you're either born with it or you ain't. So there's no point in playing this, what Socrates calls the destiny of man. The true quest. So that's what's brought us to the Meno. I hope something in that you can pull something from that out for yourself to develop a question and really do it. Build a question. What are you puzzled about virtue? Ethics, morality, how to live, why do we read? If virtue can be taught. What sticks out to you? Take that with you as we jump into the text. Now, let's check in with chat. If capitalists were really capitalist, then in maximizing the wealth, they wouldn't harm the worker, as that wouldn't maximize profits, as happy workers produce more. If not, then they will harm the workers by hoarding capital while starving the worker and exhausting them. Making and producing would be less, as the worker is now a slave. Well, the thing with that is, part of capitalism is what they call externalizing costs. The whole game is, how can I internalize profits? How can I get all the profits and get everyone else to pay for it, all of the costs? So if I have pollution, how can I get the world to pay for it? How can I get everyone else to breathe the bad air? How can I live on somewhere else while my factory is in a different country? How can I get the people to pay for the roads that my trucks use? Starbucks, they use water. That's like the main ingredient in their business, and he's a multi-billionaire. How can I not have to pay for the water? All the big companies, they pump their pollution into the ocean. They don't have to pay for that. Everyone else does. Hi, welcome in the chat. Hey. Well, that's the game. Exploit, harm everybody else and externalizing costs while being greedy little pigs for themselves. That's capitalism. Now, the thing is, you can also apply that to workers. You can exploit and work to death children in sweatshops, or adults in capitalism. Work them to death, and hey, who cares? Just get another one, hire another one. There's nothing inherently related to the logos in capitalism. It's a sick logos that says, well, if everybody works in the most selfish ways, if everyone works in the worst ways, then somehow, because of what they call the invisible hand, some magic man in the sky, then it'll all work out. Well, even the person who coined the phrase, the invisible hand, said, I was wrong, that's baloney. So it's inherently based on a lie. There's no reason, there's no logic there. It's unjust. So what? If they're being unjust, how do we turn it around? How do we introduce virtue? How do we teach virtue at a societal level? Don't let capitalists steal your joy. So that's a question. Can virtue even be taught? A lot of people think, hey, we just have to wait for the boomers to die out, and hopefully our planet isn't completely screwed by then. And after all these boomers who don't give a crap about anybody else, after they die, then maybe us younger generation can save things, can turn it around. Because we were raised with the internet. We know that there are hundreds of religions and they can't all be right. We know that false beliefs are the cause of most problems. We know that capitalism is a lie. We know that we are being forced to attack people and see them as opposites or enemies because we got raised with the internet. Those boomers didn't, and they never changed their mind. That's one opinion. Or maybe there is something called learning, and virtue, true virtue, can be taught and learned. But how do we know whether that's the case? And equally so, as we apply it to society or the lesser, we can also apply it to the greater. What's the greater? Our souls. Because this society will come and go. Humanity may not last another 50 years. Could be one of the many species who have become extinct. But our souls, according to what we are discovering in the Phaedo, our souls will outlast it. Our souls may be eternal and immortal. So the greater, the more significant thing is our souls. And we want to make the most of our time here to learn in the best possible way. What would that be? How do we improve our souls? The questions that make us rational. Where did we come from? Where are we going? And what should we be doing while we're here? So the greater is our soul. As we apply it to the lesser society, let's also apply it to the greater. That's where we have our main eye, because hey, hopefully others will get on board when they see how much fun we're having. But for us, we have that question. How do we learn virtue? Can it even be taught? Or are we kind of slave to the whims of fate, riding the winds of fate, wherever they take us? So are we doomed? Yes. So these are the questions we're bringing in with us. Can virtue be taught? Maybe. Can our society be saved? Can our souls be saved? And is there a reason for us being here? Or is it just meaningless? Lots of questions. I hope you have some with you. Now let's jump into the text and start exploring. Here's our scroll, and there should be a text on there. So let's bring it up. Now, speaking of being taught, for those who are starting the series with the Meno, we are reading the 1 Balboa translation. This is very, very important because what we're discovering about reading is it's something to do with piecing together pieces of a puzzle, but also discovering the questions. There are some hidden questions in the text. There are some obvious ones that follow the narrative, but there are hidden questions. Like a good film, we have to discover the real questions in the text. And to do that, we have to have the text exactly right, because it might be one missing word or one flipped word or a passage that doesn't quite fit. There are lots of ways of discovering a puzzle, but to do that, you need the actual original text. Up until now, we haven't had it. The translations that we have in English have been terrible translations. Key words missing, concepts that we don't have an English word for, like nous, translated as knowledge. Nous isn't knowledge, not the way we think is knowledge. Dianoia, translated as understanding, we use understanding and knowledge, but if you don't realize that dianoia and nous are the Greek words behind them, you'll miss it entirely, because it's not like the way we think of understanding and knowledge. Some words like a big one we mentioned today. One of the reasons why the Logos is rejected by people who claim to be experts is they mistranslate the word idea as form. It's not a form or concept. It's not a concept or abstraction. It ain't an abstraction. You need the Greek. Idea means to behold. It's an aspect of the beholding of being or reality. This is so important. And if you realize that metaphysics is specifically the understanding of the realm of being, that's what the understanding is directed to. That's what makes it dianoia. That's what the knowledge is of. That's what makes it nous. Then the aspects of that realm of being that you need, the parts that you need to understand, are the ideas, the aspects of being. So if you reject that or you mistranslate that, then you don't have any metaphysics. You're not doing philosophy. Philosophy is specifically dianoia. A better word for philosophy is philodianoia. Philosophia, love of wisdom. Wisdom is the virtue, the reasoning part of the soul. The part of the soul that Socrates calls logos. But whether it's that virtue or the other virtues, they're all directed towards dianoia, understanding of being. And what are the parts? The ideas, the aspects of being, beauty itself, justice itself, ways of beholding true reality. So it's laughable how terrible the teachings of Socrates have been up until now. Some people call it a great betrayal to our intellectual and spiritual roots, the golden age of Western civilization. Fortunately for us, we have the text with the Greek, and we have a translator, Juan Balboa, who has studied the Logos for many, many years, and he tends to keep the keywords in, like ousia, like altos. Another one, altos, never translated as self for some reason. Now, that's a good question. Out of all of the words that are mistranslated, why is self always mistranslated? That's a good one. I'm not going to give the game away on that one, but that's a good one. Nevertheless, Juan Balboa tries to keep true to those fundamental Greek words. So we are at a very fortunate part of history where we can actually finally read what Socrates was actually saying, not the bollocks that has been fed to us by people who are either ignorant or actively lying to us because of their own problems or ignorance or societal pressures. So we can finally pick up the game that we're here to play and maybe fulfill our purpose, or, as we say in philosophy, destiny. So that's why we're reading this text. That's why it has it's a bit frayed. It's an ancient scroll that, as we can see in the text here, because it's ancient and special. All right, let's jump in. Meno. Persons of the dialogue. We have Meno, or sometimes he's called Menon. Socrates. I heard of this guy. I heard he's pretty rad. Meno's slave boy. And angry Anytos. So 4 characters. Let's see what Socrates has to say. Meno, can you tell me? Oh, by the way, as we read, we have in the back of our mind the stages of learning that we've got from the Phaedo. What are they? Well, the first one he calls philomethesis, which is trust the logos. If you don't trust there is something called the logos, an understandable, knowable pattern of all reality that is able to be understood, then you're not going to be able to discover it. If you don't think there is such a thing as, I don't know, a horse, you're never going to. People don't hunt for horses. If you don't think there is such a thing as the One Piece, you're not going to go on a quest to discover it, if you're certain there isn't such a thing. So be open and trust, but also remember and repeat. So we're going to look for key sections of the text, remember them, reflect on them, talk about it with our friends. But the second level of reading is see if we can discover, let's discover the pattern of the dialectic. And we've talked about it a lot, but just as a quick refresher, because we have gone on about it a lot. So we want to come into the text with, where's my pen? 2 levels, of reading. Philo, which means love. Math thesis, which means love of learning. That's our trust and repeating. And philo, love of Sophia, wisdom. But we can actually call it philodianoia, which is looking for and doing ourselves the dialectic. See if we can do both. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But also we'll level up our understanding of the dialectic that we can take back with us into our second reading of the Phaedo. Now, what's the dialectic? Very, very simple. Di means 2. So we have 2 things. We have the subject, or self, and we have another, whatever other is you would like to use or is relevant. So just 2 things, die for 2. But also we have don't have to put that in brackets. We have 2 sections. Two sections. If the subject is, and if. So let's just put S. If S. Because that's the self. We use the letter S for subject or self, and other, we say O. If S is, and if S isn't, these are the 2 universes we create in our understanding. So the Marvel Cinematic Universe have what if Spider-Man becomes the Hulk, and what if he doesn't. And then underneath that we have four categories. 1, self to itself, or definition. 2, so what can you say about the subject yourself? So we pull out the key terms as we read. If he talks about being, and he says, oh, being, by the way, being is immortal. Oh, pull it out, put it in a notepad. That goes into the first category of what it is. And then if Socrates goes on to say, by the way, people who aren't listening to me and think they know better, you know what they'll say being is? They'll say it's an illusion. They'll say it's an abstraction. They'll say we can't know what happens when you die. Whenever he says something about that, put it in side B. So we can call, because he's saying, hey, that's what being isn't. And you have to be doing both to be doing the dialectic. Otherwise, you're not really understanding something if you can't recognize what it isn't. The example I use sometimes is, hey, if somebody keeps stealing your lunch at work, and you think, well, maybe if it's Joe who's stealing my lunch at work, then in this side A, whenever my lunch goes missing, or whenever Joe is around, my lunch goes missing. So maybe it's him. We call this part A. But that's not going to give you a definite understanding, because sometimes Joe isn't there, part B, and your lunch goes missing as well. So it can't be Joe. Right, but what happens, so in the chat, if they steal your lunch, add hot sauce like habanero, and they will stop. But what if Sally has an allergy to habanero? It might be a fun prank on Joe. You might have to be sure that it's actually Joe. Well, hang on a second. If Joe was away on vacation for a week and your lunch still went missing, then you may be committing manslaughter with your option. Because it might not be Joe, because it still goes missing when he's not there. You have to do both. Maybe it's Jill who's doing it. You got to account for that. Otherwise, you might end up ending Jill's life. And that's a good way of getting fired from your job. Move it down a little bit. Yeah. So if we want to understand what being is, we've got to recognize what it isn't. And that was important earlier in this conversation too, because we talked about the significance of learning the logos, but also we talked about how Socrates is mistranslated or misrepresented at colleges. If you're not recognizing that, then you might have a unsuspected false belief, or you might have an intuition that, Socrates is a bit silly. It's just a logical exercise. Surely we can't discover the meaning of life from Socrates. But if you do a dialectic, then you recognize, oh, hang on a second. It's important to understand what Socrates is saying, part A, but also what isn't true of Socrates, because the reasons you might be averse to discovering the meaning of life by reading the logos presented by Socrates is because of part B, because our culture or our teachers or our media or whoever it was presents philosophy as something completely different than what it is, either misrepresenting Socrates or philosophy itself. The word philosophy, Socrates says, hey, you know what? If you don't understand the logos, the dialectic, then you'll think philosophy is just about collecting opinions. That's kind of exactly the way it's taught today. Kant's opinions, Hegel's opinions, Aristotle's opinions. Turn on a YouTube video, whether it's about politics, which is philosophy applied to the lesser, to society, or whether it's about philosophy. Are they ever doing the logos? No, they are debating their own opinions. Who cares? Sure, it can be nice to see someone who's clever speaking truth to idiots, to people who are actively lying to manipulate people. And I like that sometimes. There are some YouTubers that I like that there's a debate recently. Who's the guy? He debated some Christian guy, and the debate was whether or not the Bible is true. And this fellow supporting the Bible was a very, very unjust sort of person with his reasoning. He would lie, he would obfuscate the point, he would reject the point, he would bully, and he would shout over, doing all of the things that everyone recognized. Okay, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Which is great, because this guy can manipulate other people if somebody doesn't speak truth to him. But so what? Is he going to change? I mean, there is a currency in that. Like, it is kind of nice having reason spoken to people who harm people through by replacing reason with faith. Blind obedience to that which is irrational or absurd can't be proven or is disproven. Because why? Who knows? Manipulation, rhetoric of some kind, that can be nice, but they're always debates. They're not dialectics. They're not discovering the true paradigm of reason. They're just giving arguments to support the particular beliefs that they have. But what about the truth? And if there is a truth, we wouldn't need to debate opinions, either with armies or with political force or with money exploitation, or just with being a clever debater, a debate bro. We wouldn't have to do any of that. We can simply cooperatively, supportively, nurturingly, empathetically, rationally, fairly, and with fun, follow the logos, follow the stages together the way Socrates does to the truth. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. See, when you see it, it's obvious. That was a point we made earlier. We talked about people in that other game. How can I manipulate opinions so I can personally profit or benefit at the expense of everybody else in society? One of their techniques is to, it's gatekeeping. Oh, it's too complicated. Hugh wouldn't know. You're a woman. Can't say that anymore. Well, Hugh wouldn't know. You're a poor. Oh, you can still say that sometimes. You wouldn't know. You're a this race. Yeah, people do say that. It's picking up a lot of steam, even though we fought a world war over that against the Nazis. A couple of them. Still picking up steam with that 40% of people who are want to conserve their own opinions. But what's left? You can't have an opinion on that because you haven't memorized the text, you haven't got a degree, blah, 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 blah. Now that's what would happen if people are using different forces to debate opinions. But if there's understanding, you can do this. Everybody can play understanding. Anyone can understand how a toaster works. You don't have to force your beliefs on others with the crusade. Hundreds of years of torturing and murdering people until you accept my belief about a toaster. It's absurd. You can just look it up on the internet. How does a toaster work? Easy. You wouldn't have the crusades. So, very, very simple once you see it. And that was my point. If they actually do understand what they're talking about, then they should be able to see it simply and explain it simply. That's what we're doing now. We're explaining how to explain. Simply. How simple? Oh, let's check in with the chat. S is the fact name, and the second S is the definition of. Yes, very good. So, we have S used twice. So what happens is this S has now been upgraded a little bit because you've added the key terms. The key terms that relate to it. So you can say, yes, what is the subject itself, or self-related, not to other things, but related only to itself? And you're right. So that second S has kind of upgraded for us. And it's that upgraded S that rolls on to the next category, which is category 2, which is the right color. This S, how does this newly defined S relate to another, or function, or we call that demonstration? Yes, very good. I have coffee, and you know what they say about people who drink it? They do philosophy. Cheers. Cheers to that. You wouldn't know you don't have a shiny watch. Right. Right. You don't have a shiny watch. You're not wearing an expensive suit. Right? All of the movies about Wall Street and all that crap, it's all appearances. It's all appearances. Hey, don't you know, young Wall Street guy, you need $1,000 suit. And then the young guy goes, who cares? It's all about opinions, young buck. We're selling them a lifestyle. We're selling them a promise. We're selling them bollocks. Opinions. Yeah, you don't have the watch. Anti-V people say that a lot about the same with yes. They don't know what a finger is. Yes. Yes. More true S. Thank you for the follow on YouTube, Rectify. So, our reasoning rolls on. So we're discovering something about reasoning. There should be a flow. And if you've ever pulled your hair out watching somebody, a politician, talk on television, it might be because their reasoning doesn't flow. They'll say something and someone will ask them a question, and instead of taking the next step together with the questioner, both walking hand in hand towards truth, because we're all human beings, we are all souls, we all have the same quest. That's why it's called the destiny of man, and we may even be the same self if the ultimate cause is the one self. Instead of recognizing that, what do? They'll quickly change the subject. Oh, but what about the other person? But what about this? What about isms? Or let me tell you a story about my folksy upbringing. Or let me pull in a random anecdote that doesn't have anything to do with what we just said. So everyone recognizes that. They know it's garbage that politicians speak. So they know what isn't. In fact, you could say ever since Socrates, we've been playing out a dialectic of what isn't philosophy or what isn't reasoning. We're playing it out in real time. Our history has been a living dialectic of side B. What would happen if the logos isn't? But we want to do this part that's left out. Well, what is it? What is the standard we should be holding every single news journalist to, every single politician to, every single teacher to? Yes, we know Socrates says, these clever people, what does he say? He mixes, he has a phrase. So the quote I was thinking of from the Phaedo that characterizes these anti-logos, we call them BS artists or politicians or mainstream media journalists or whatever, but what do? Mix the dry with the wet. But I just looked at it and I saw that underneath was a single word. So one of the other reasons why we read the Balboa is we get to copy the words. When a certain section hangs on a keyword, we can just copy it, go over to our, actually, I'll bring it up. Here we go. Now we're in space because the background has been set on an ancient Greek beach, you will realize, but they don't have internet in ancient Greek times, so we have to fly up into space, which means we need to fly up into space so we can access the internet that they didn't have back then. So, let me bring it up. Where is it? This one? There we go. So, we get the Greek, put it into Google Translate. Video. Throw it into Wiktionary, because sometimes the lexicon doesn't work when I stream. Here we go. To mix something dry with something wet, mostly with the sense of mixing as to spoil or defile, especially tears or blood. They sullied their garments with tears, stained, jumbled together, confound, confuse. They're mingled all up together, did all at random. Exactly. Isn't that exactly how politicians speak? Trying to shut the logos down, the unfolding rational steps of reasoning that will lead to understanding, to hope that maybe they'll use good marketing buzzwords that will appeal to their base, and their base will just fill in. I'll just use the word family, and they'll project what they think family means for them. I'll say hope and change, and then they will hope for whatever they already hoped for. Casting a wide net because they're not saying anything. And everyone projects their fantasies, which is why we have comedy channels that have people go out and they ask actual questions. Oh, you like Trump? Well, what about, but you were against, I don't know, criminals? Right, I hate criminals. That's why I like Trump. Okay, but what if Trump was a convicted criminal? Of course he is. And then they get really upset. Oh, you are a liberal, blah, 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 blah. Why? Because they have been, they are shutting down the logos to hope that they can appeal to their own opinions, and they don't say anything so people can project whatever opinions, completely cut off from reality. They're projecting hope, prayer, faith, belief, opinions. It's all projection of your own personal things that you carry that they may not even know that they're carrying. That's why it's all past focused. It's why every Republican politician for the last 50 years have said, hey, make America great again. This isn't new to Trump. The past is good, where you got your prejudices. That's right. But then someone will say, hey, when was America great? Back when we had slavery? Back when women couldn't vote? When? There is no when. They're using nonsense language to appeal to their own projections of their own inner opinions and pathologos. So, jumbled together, mixing the dry with the wet. Do you have any more? Yeah, confuse, at random. Okay, so we got it. So that's cool. So that's an example of what we do. The expression was mix the dry with the wet, and it turned out to be true. So we looked it up. That's where we're at in our society. Yes, it's kind of annoying that the last 2,500 years has been a dialectic of what it isn't, of what truth and logos and philosophy isn't. We didn't pick up what Socrates was doing. Literally, he was murdered by the state. So it sucks that we are playing out all of the terrible consequences that follow for a society that doesn't have the logos. But fortunately, we have the technology and the translations that we can pick up the logos again. So I wouldn't say it's hope. There is a rational series of steps humanity can take to evolve into a higher state of being from irrational barbarianism. And there are steps we can take. That's what this channel is about. We as souls can pick up this quest to become rational. It's easier to see it with the others, with the Trumpers or you pick a religious cult that's mental. It's easy to point at them and say, oh, Their beliefs are nonsense, crazy. How could they believe something so wild? We too, if you have integrity, because they don't suspect that. They might not even be aware of their false belief they're projecting onto Trump or to their God or whatever. So too, if we have integrity, we must have, because we're all human beings, we all were born into a family where we had to survive by picking up some unsuspected false beliefs within the family culture. We too have some false beliefs that cause us to be blind to the logos or anti-logos, and that's what keeps us chained to fate, our human problems. So what? So we are at a really exciting point of time where we have the text, we have the internet, so we can look it up for ourselves. Literally, nobody's standing in the way, no interpretation or gatekeeping. We literally understand for ourselves. And what does that mean? Once you understand something for yourself, do you have a need for belief? Do you have to believe someone else? With the big funny hats, maybe? The funny hats? Or the holy robes? The shaved heads? Carrying the staffs? Doesn't matter, because you understand it for yourself. So that's really cool. So silver lining. So we don't want to mix the dry with the wet. As we've seen time and time again, we want to do this instead. What Socrates is saying we need to do to pick up the art of the logos. So, demonstration, how does it function? Now those things, same thing again, those things that have been affected by the demonstration or functioning would then, having been affected, relate to other others. Division. Having been affected by beauty or justice, any of those ideas or aspects of being. So, and finally, those others. So this is the thing that we should be demanding. So next time we say, hey, you're not reasoning well, you're using garbage speak, rhetoric. What about isms? They will say, no, well, that's just your opinion. My opinion and the American people or the Australian people think that I'm saying good stuff. We'll say, actually, no, it's not an opinion. It's actually a standard for reasoning that applies everywhere. It's universal. It's called the dialectic. Your points should follow in this order. Together, with us. So no long speeches, no monologues, no mixing the dry with the wet. Talking about causes and effects and then switching the game around again, shifting the goalposts. We all know it. Everyone can use it. Oh, and you know what? You will benefit because you are harming your own soul with this rhetoric because you don't know what you're talking about. And you don't like, if you really are honest with yourself, you don't like having to pretend. You don't like that your job is dependent on you having to pretend. No one likes being under capitalism. Even the billionaires. And we can see them. We can see the Elon Musks and the Donald Trumps. We know what they're like. They're not happy. They're not healthy. Everyone wins. That's the game. The old mentality of fighting opinions, opinion versus opinion, is me versus them. It's team sports. So the people who are like, Republicans or whatever, they're not interested in truth. They're interested in my team. I wear the red and the other team wears the blue team and red team. There's a winner and loser. There's not a winner and loser in truth, in philosophy. Everyone wins. That's the game. That's what it means to be rational. Now, having gone through that process, this other then comes all the way back to self. Having been affected by those others, how do they then relate back to beauty? How does beauty function? How does it relate to Socrates? How does Socrates then relate to us? Then us, after reading Socrates, how do we relate back to beauty? We love it. We might study it. We want to understand it. We want to know it. We want to do a dialectic on it. See? we go back to the start. So it unfolds and it returns back to the start in a conclusion, and you have a new way of seeing the definition. So it goes, it unfolds and it reverts. But when you revert, you have a deeper understanding because you've gone through that process, which means you start here and you end here. And by the way, if you've got a new level of understanding, you've got more material to do another dialectic. So it spirals up. Whereas those who shut down the logos don't grow. They stay stagnant. They stay entrenched in their ignorance, and then we say, well, we guess we just have to wait for the boomers to die, because they are stuck in their false beliefs, entrenched in their ignorance because they're not spiraling up. Why? Because no one has taught them the art of the dialectic. Or maybe they haven't learnt the art of the dialectic. Maybe it can't be taught. That's where we are. Can this be taught? So we want to see if we can, let's get this out of the way. See if we can look for these sections as we read. So that's synthesis. That's the wrong color. That others back to self is called synthesis, because you synthesize what you've seen in the division. Can you conclude? And analysis. You analyze it back on where you started. So that's a little refresher. Good to repeat, even though we've gone through it a few times. I'm confused about what opinion is exactly. Good. Take that confusion. Build a question out of your confusion. How would you rephrase your statement? I'm very confused about what opinion is exactly. It's a statement. Can you rephrase that into a question? So then you're in the game. And share the question with us. Maybe we have a similar question, or we can share your question. So this is how we're reading and why we're reading. So let's go. Meno, can you tell me, O Socrates, whether virtue is teachable? Right off the bat. Wow, we started big, didn't we? What happened there? We started right out of the gates. What do we see here? Well, we see the big question. Is virtue teachable? What else can we see? Tell me. Is that teaching? Tell me. In other words, can we see a definition of everything that's to come in our dynamic between Socrates and Meno, or Meno and Socrates? Can we see a definition of the nature of the text itself? Can we see within that simple statement everything that's to follow? What's he asking? Is virtue teachable? Does he know what virtue is? I don't know. He hasn't defined it. He's not using the dialectic. He's got to define it. Has he demonstrated virtue? What level is he on in the dialectic if he's asking whether it's teachable? Which of these four categories? Is he defining it? Is he he's jumping to a conclusion? Right, good. What one is the conclusion? Is he defining it? By the way, when he's saying, hey, you tell me, Socrates, is that a good demonstration of virtue? Maybe analysis. Or maybe division. Maybe this one, like, hey, maybe this is virtue, and how does virtue relate to Socrates, and then how does Socrates relate to him? Maybe he wants Socrates to be at that level. Or maybe he's already concluded, and he's at analysis. Hey, I've concluded what it is, now I want to analyze it and say whether or not it's teachable. Yeah, it could be both. Keep both. If we have two options, as we refreshed from the Phaedo. Take them both. So, isn't this fun? This is how Socrates in Plato works. Think. Can we see? But if we are doing the dialectic better, can we see this as a definition in pure form? Whoops. Of what's to come, what will be demonstrated in the text, what will be divided up in the text. Maybe. I don't know. I mean, that's why you have to go back and read it again. So it is important to read the text more than once, because you get to the end and you see things that will make the shed light on the beginning again. What? Just like this. You go back to the beginning, you shed light on what was the beginning again. So we are dialectically a text while also discovering the dialectic and seeing if it's applying to the text itself and Meno itself. Oh, it's turtles all the way down, folks. It's dialectic everywhere. So can you tell me whether it's teachable? Or is virtue not teachable? Well, and acquired by practice. Well, he's got the side B. Is it not? Is it or is it not? But he didn't stop there. He's offering what it isn't, acquired by practice. Well, what if teaching is to tell you to practice? Isn't that what we're doing? We're not just passively reading. We are practicing it. We're trying to put the dialectic onto it. Can it be both? Or if neither, by practicing nor learning, then does it come to human beings by nature or in some other way? So, interesting way to start the text. Can you find puzzles in that? That will help you as you read. Look for a puzzle. Socrates. Oh, Meno. On the one hand, for those unfamiliar, there's a word men and then there is a word de. In the Greek, it means this and that. Now, we don't have an exact English translation, so the lexicon says on the one hand this, and on the other hand that. But I don't like reading on the other hand, on the one hand, that's 4 words instead of 3 letters. But now on the other hand, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words for a 2-letter word. Our English language is cumbersome. So, I like to read if I can catch it before I have to read it. I skip this. It's kind of inferred. Oh, Meno, in times past, the Thessalians were famous and admired by the Hellenes for their horsemanship and their riches. But, as it appears to me, they are also famous for their wisdom. See, I can just skip those 2 words out. Oh yeah, Greek's fun. Oh yeah. So why is he talking about horsemanship and riches? So, already introducing some characters or mythology, which could be a way of demonstrating what he's going to say, or dividing it up into a mythology, into a story. I don't know. Admired by the Hellenes. Now we know the Hellenes are to do with wisdom. They're the philosophers. For their horsemanship and their riches. But as it appears to me, they are also famous for their wisdom. And not the least the citizens of your companion Aristippus. So the citizens of your companion Aristippus, who are the Larissaeans. Oh, goodness. But Gorgias has brought this about for you. For when he came to that city, the leading men of the family of Alius, to which thine lover Aristippus belongs. Okay, so he's got a lover. Aristippus is his lover. What's the significance of that? I don't know. Yeah, Aristippus. There's a lot going on. Like, there's a lot. There's these places, there's these people, there's a relationship. So what? Well, it should reflect the dialectic, because we have terms that need to be defined. How do the terms function? What do terms do? They have relationships. So we have terms and relationships. And then we have division up to other kinds. Having been related, what are the other relationships and terms? Lovers. What's the consequences of this? So all of this we demand to see eventually, when we come back to the start, in this introduction by Socrates. He's starting with the myth. What's mythology? Representing in characters and drama and narrative the terms, the relationships, the principles of the logos. So he's giving us a big puzzle right off the bat. This doesn't make any gosh darn sense yet. Like, why is he starting with all of these names? Socrates ain't no fool. He might recognize it might take 2,500 years before they pick up what he's saying. Why is he doing this? Question. Puzzles. So we should be very confused. I am, at least. Gorgias brought this about for you. When he came to that city, the leading men of the family of Alius, to which your lover Aristippus belongs, and the rest of the Thessalians fell in love with his wisdom. That's interesting. What's philosophy? Philos Sophia, love of wisdom. Sophia, that's the Greek there, we can see it, Sophia. And surely then he has also accustomed you to the habit of answering in a fearless and grand style. If one happens to know what is being asked. And if it befits those who know. Now, our translator highlighted this. Knowing is important. Inasmuch as he also awaits self for questioning by any Hellene who so chooses. So answer in a fear and grand style if you know what's being asked, as if it befits those who know, as much as it also avails him for questioning by the Hellene, any Hellene who so chooses, on any subject they choose. And no one at all ever goes unanswered. So he's answering everyone. And already we have a keyword. Self. Now, if you'll notice that I read it in the first way. Now, one of the fun things we can have with the Greek is the word altos is inherently a triad. Self has 3 levels of meanings for the Greek. It has the particular, which is normally it. We can replace the word it, which is to do, and we have the honorific, the self of Achilles' sword, the excellence. And of course, and just like when we are in metaphysics, the ideas, the aspects of being, we look for self-justice, self-beauty. These are the honorifics. And of course, we have the ultimate. The ultimate term in philosophy is The one self. The self. Ultimate. So we have a triad. As we read, we are going to find many more triads as we go. I hope. We carry them with us. They go into our inventory as we call them our skill trees. Look for patterns. Whenever we start a new text, we draw this diagram of our adventurer. This is our philosopher with our beard, smile, our robe, our staff, our feetsies. This is forget that. This is us. And we've already mentioned we look for questions, we put them in our inventory, take them with us. We look for hypotheses. These are our ifs. But also we have on this side of our inventory, when we open up our menu, we have our skill trees. These are what we level up. So we look for patterns of 2s, look for patterns of 3s. And we see them as, we see these patterns of 2s and patterns of 3s. We add another branch to our tree. And then we might be able to rub these sticks together to gain insights when we have a whole bunch. So already we've got a 3. So put this 3 into your skill tree, jot it down somewhere in whatever document you're using or notepad thing you're using. This is what we're learning to do. We're learning to read as we go. And one of those is the word altos. Altos, or self. So if we see the word altos or self in the text, I tend to hit the easy one first. That one should be the obvious. So we talked about a good film or a good video game. They'll have a story, and there'll be a puzzle. The main puzzle the main character has to solve. Let's take Inception, the film about dreams. The main character has to incept an idea into this guy's mind through his dreams, and that will allow him passage back to see his family. Now that's the main one. That's the main story. That's the easy one. Everyone's going to see that. Now underneath that will be another story. And the way Inception is written, it kind of hits you on the head that this main story isn't the main one. Yes, the end of the story is when this one is resolved. That's the framework. When the main question is solved, well, that's the end of the story. This question might or might not be solved, or it might take you to be an active participant, practice it to solve. For the Inception, hey, is it actually this guy's dream, or is Leonardo DiCaprio the one dreaming? Because everyone seems to be saying weird things to him, and he seems to be breaking the rules. He hands out his totem after saying that you shouldn't. When he walks into the room with Batman's butler, what does he say? What's his name? I love you, Batman. Some people just want to watch the world burn. I can't do an imitation of him. But you know the guy, he's Batman's butler. Anyway, when Leonardo DiCaprio goes into the place, he says, hey, when are you gonna wake up? So there's kind of an obvious second level of question. What's really going on? But that wouldn't be a good film because it seems a bit cheesy. if it was just that. There has to be a third level of question or puzzle that needs to be solved, that you have to go on a deep dive through YouTube for to figure out what that might be, which is fun. Films like Fight Club and Inception and that, you can go down to see people who actually pay attention and piece the puzzle pieces together, do some actual work. They'll discover there's a third question and they'll have to create hypotheses, or it's just a theory, a film theory. That's a famous YouTube channel. That's his catchphrase. Theories or ifs to figure out this question that they had to also discover, that wasn't made explicit. This one, there'll be clues that there's another question here. This one isn't. You have to use the patterns to discover this question and realize, hang on a second, he gave us some clues. It was pretty obvious that there was another question going on under Inception other than the main narrative. It's so obvious that you have to go, hang on a second, whatever was those obvious clues to this one, I need to apply those same things to the next level down. Just like this isn't answered, the first level is answered. The first level to level 1 is the question is given and the answer is given at the end of the story. Level 2, the question is kind of half given and the answer is half given as well. But you've got to work it out. Not everyone will get that second question. Your grandma who goes to the film with you doesn't really care. Now, there'll be a level 3 where the question isn't given and the answer may or may not be given. Now, a good film, the answer to this question will be given. There are some filmmakers who don't because, I don't know, maybe they do. Maybe you have to watch his other movies to get the clues. But anyway, that's the 3 levels. Now, that's kind of a paradigm. It happens to be what works for good filmmaking, the best filmmaking, a Christopher Nolan sort of film. But they are just copying the archetype that could be applied to any film. It doesn't have to be Christopher Nolan. What does that mean? Fight Club has the same thing. It has the main narrative. It gives you the second question at the end, by the way, the twist. I'm not going to ruin it. There's a twist at the end and you realize, oh, there was a whole other question the whole way through. Now I've got to re-watch it from the beginning and read it a second time with this new question. But hopefully you realize if that is the case, then in my second reading, he won't give you the twist. You have to apply the twist to whatever your conclusion was to discover a third twist that isn't given to you. So, Fight Club's a really good example. You know the twist. If you've seen the movie, you know the twist in Fight Club. Use the principle of the twist, apply that again. Yes. Apply that again, not to the twist, but to something else to discover a new twist, a new level of question. And some people in chat may have realized it already. So, it can apply to Fight Club, it can apply to Inception, meaning there must be a paradigm that applies to a principle that exists before Inception, Fight Club, that these filmmakers use to make their good films. And if there is a paradigm, there should be an excellence or an honorific or an ideal version. Just like we say the ideal hero's journey is this one, the philosopher's journey. And whether or not a story or a Star Wars film series or a Baldur's Gate video game series or a Elden Ring series, whether or not that's going to be successful will be just dependent on whether or not they follow the paradigm. Whether or not, I mean, they'll discover it as they go. The hero's journey is close, and that's, mandatory reading in screenwriting. Joseph Campbell. So we want to ask, well, hang on a second, what's the paradigm? What's the ultimate? And what's the highest expression? What's the honorific? Maybe it's this word here. Whoops. Maybe it's this word here. Now that's a hypothesis. Let's see if it pans out. Why? Because every time we hear the word self, this one should work. This one should be given. This is the first one. Even grandma sees this one. It wouldn't be a story that makes sense. The story would sound irrational. Oh, thanks for hanging out. Now we have to puzzle, what's the honorific? How can we read self to mean the ideal or something to do with being? We got to discover that ourselves. We got to do some work. We might have to read it a couple of times to find that. And then after we see that, can we apply whatever brought us from there to there to go apply that back on itself to discover the ultimate? Because the word self literally means all three. So, taking some time to outline that. There are many sorts of puzzles like that we'll discover in our reading, and that's good because we want to get the puzzles. We want to play, we want to solve them. We want to be Sherlock Holmes characters. So, let's use this as an example. Hey, what does Gorgias do? Well, when Gorgias came to that city, your lover Aristippus, from a good family, and the rest of the Thessalians fell in love with Gorgias's wisdom. Gorgias must have been a really respected bloke. They must have thought he had wisdom. And what did he do? He accustomed you into the habit, trained you up to answer in a fearless and grand style. He taught you how to answer questions in a certain kind of a style. And by the way, if one happens to know what's being asked, as it befits those who know, people who know, in as much as he also avails it for questioning by the Hellenes, who so chooses, on any subject they choose. How could the honorific apply there? Okay, so it befits those to know, but he also avails it for questioning by any Hellene who so chooses, on any subject they choose. Now that's tricky grammar here. It might be worth pulling up one of the other translations just to get a bit better English grammar. It avails self. Balboa tends to use formal English, like thine self instead of yourself, that kind of thing. And no one at all ever goes unanswered. Hey, if you've got wisdom, Gorgias says, answer everyone all the time in a grand style. Hey, that's what it means to be wise. According to who? Gorgias. Socrates recognizes his teacher, recognizes his style, recognizes the principle of this teaching style. Okay? Notice we just said the word self doesn't say that answer everyone all the time. There are some answers that are hidden in good filmmaking. So we already have reason to wonder about Gorgias. But here in Athens, O dear Meno, we are kept in the opposite way. For we are in a certain dry spell, as it were, of wisdom. Dry spell. So that the wisdom seems to have moved from this place to yours. Does wisdom move in places? What's he saying in not clever way, but in a artful way where you might have to wonder to find it. For I am certain that if you were to ask any person here such a question, there is no one at all who would not laugh and say, ha 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 ha. Oop. Oh, stranger, I dare say that it appears to me that I am somehow blessed, so as to be able to say whether excellence can be taught, or if in what way it comes to be known, taught and known. Also keep in mind, the word virtue also means excellence. When we talk about virtue, we mean the excellence. Or another word for excellence is honorific. This guy here. Already we're making some cool connections. Thus I stand in need of knowing this, whether excellence is teachable or not teachable. I stand in need. Socrates isn't going around answering in a fearless and grand style. What's he doing? He's saying, I want to know. I'm in need. I'm in need. But it's Socrates. If anyone's going to know, it's Socrates. What's he playing at here? No.
Wow.
Come on, man. Flibbity jibbity nonsense.
Is he doing flibbity jibbity nonsense? What's going on? So that neither do I happen to know what in the world self-excellence. See? Not just excellence, but self-excellence. Capital S. Our author already gave us a capital S because it's quite obvious that how the honorific plays in. Not just excellence, but the ideal or the paradigm or being or the highest excellence. Thus I, O Meno, since self has to be in such a reality as this, am also poor as the rest of the citizens, and I reproach myself, since I know nothing at all of virtue. What? Whoops, sorry.
Wow. That's one for the blooper reel. That's one for the blooper reel.
Whoops, that's one for the blooper reel.
That's one for the blooper reel.
I know nothing at all about virtue. What the hell?
Come on, man.
Wow.
What? Socrates not knowing about virtue? What? My spidey senses are tingling. That doesn't make sense. I'm puzzled about that flibbity jibbity nonsense.
Flibbity jibbity nonsense.
What's going on here? That should be a puzzle. Thus, if I do not know what it is, how indeed can I know its qualities? What? He's thinking in terms of qualities. If I don't know what it is, how do I know its qualities? Oh, interesting. Or does it appear to be possible to you? See, this is the old English stuff that can be a bit confusing. But as we go, we will have one of the other translations on. It's not going to be accurate, but sometimes it flows a little bit more with the English because it sacrifices accuracy for flow sometimes. But we can do both. We can do both. And where's my balloons or something? No, I want balloons. How about this one? We can do both because we have internet. Oh, we have some confetti. Hooray. All right. If I don't know what it is, how can I know its qualities? Or does it appear to be possible to you that if there is nothing at all one recognizes about Meno, what's he doing? He's making it personal for him. It's a cool way of going. Interesting. Why is he doing that? Then how could this person know whether Meno is handsome or rich or noble or whatever has to be the opposite? What's that? Can we see the dialectic in this? Let's wonder. He's using Meno as an example. So this is another thing we're looking for. We're looking for, drum roll please, analogies. How does Socrates use analogies? What's analogy? Lesser is to the greater. We were just talking about how the word self has a lesser, a greater, and an ultimate. So we'll keep this in the back of our mind because that'll be our third watch of Inception or our third level of reading. Keep that in brackets. But the easier one to see, lesser is to greater. So he is saying, hey, virtue is to its qualities, which is what? Teachable. As, so this is a relation. So what are we looking for? We're looking for terms and relations. This is a term. This is our term. As we read, we want to pick out key terms of the text. Is the whole text an analogy? If we're talking about virtue, then we want it in our souls. So whatever we read, hopefully, will be an analogy to us. So can this whole text be an analogy? And how is analogy used? Just like we said with watching a Christopher Nolan film or a Fight Club, the way the twist was used in Fight Club, learn it so you can apply that to the new twist, to the new level of reading. In other words, if we want to apply this as an analogy to our soul, we want excellence of our soul, we want virtue, we want to be, in another word for excellence of the soul, enlightened. We want enlightenment. Then if the text is an analogy, how does Socrates use analogy in the, how does he use it so we can apply it to us? Or in other words, Socrates' use of analogies is the lesser. How can we learn about that to apply it to the greater, our souls? So what's analogy? It has terms and it has relations. That's this part here and this part here. So, virtue, is to its qualities as teachableness, as Meno is to his qualities is handsomeness. Handsomeness. So why is Socrates starting with this? Why could he be doing this? Right off the bat, he's using an analogy. Like a paragraph in. Could he be getting us ready to read the book? Hey, if you're playing a video game, they give you the tools. This is how you swing your sword, you press X. Or any film. Hey, you want to defeat Darth Vader? This is your lightsaber. This is your force magic abilities. Maybe he is doing the same, giving us what we need to read right up front. Which is what? Analogy. But also we can ask a question. Why did he pick out him? Why did he pick out handsomeness? He seems to know something about Meno. He knows his style of answering questions. He hasn't said much, but he knows his style. He hasn't answered any questions yet, but he knows the style of answering questions he's likely to have because he knows his teacher. So he knows how he is going to demonstrate his wisdom. And he knows he's going to division it up to not just anyone who asks questions, but even, what did he say? Blah, 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 blah. Any Hellene who so chooses. So he's hitting demonstration and division. He sees that in Meno. So we can work backwards because we have the dialectic at our disposal. We have the system of thinking, we have to apply it. So what are we doing? Solving a puzzle. Hooray. If Socrates knows the demonstration, fearless way of answering, knows the division, you're going to answer this question and any question from any Hellene, that's what you're going to do. Then it would imply that he probably knows his definition of wisdom. How? He knows something beyond that. So this is the mysterious fifth level of the dialectic. The mysterious fifth level that we don't talk about much, which is what? The cause of even the dialectic. Whoa. Okay, he's already touching on that. So he's pointing out, hey, by the way, normally you do dialectics this way. You might have to use that mysterious fifth level we don't normally get into. Why? Because he hasn't mentioned the definition of wisdom that Meno has, but he has talked about what? The cause. His teacher, Gorgias. Is it Gorgias? Yes. I got it right. So, we're in for some interesting fare ahead. If he's already talking about the cause and hasn't talked about the definition, what's going on? And how cool is it that we're being taught, he's giving us definitions, demonstration, division. He's giving us analogies. But also he's telling us about what it would mean, he's not just telling us what virtue is, he hasn't done that, but he's giving us a demonstration of something. It's Socrates. So maybe if there is an excellence of the soul and Socrates is a demonstration of that, maybe that's a clue. And hey, how does he demonstrate himself? He creates an analogy. Is that a demonstration of virtue? I don't know. Put it as a question. And by the way, he picks out Meno. Is that a demonstration? Would it be good to create an analogy that someone really identifies with or really draws you in? And what does he use for the analogy for teachableness or the quality of virtue? Handsomeness. He's already talked about his lover that might have had influence over him. Oh, and so why did he pick handsomeness? That's a question. Well, he knows he's picking Meno, so this is a kind of demonstration of something, a dialectician, a philosopher, maybe excellence, maybe virtue, I don't know, something. But he picked out handsomeness. Why? Well, he's talked about, hey, you know how you got into this way, this style of wisdom from Gorgias? It was through your lover. Well, hang on a second. What would have attracted Meno to this lover? Handsomeness, I guess. That's what he's using. Which means what? He wasn't attracted to him because of something more honorific or greater. He's aiming for the lesser. Handsomeness. He didn't aim for the greater or the honorific. Honorific using the triad of the self, or lesser and greater using analogy. He's not attracted to him because of wisdom. What does that mean? Well, if it's this guy who brought him to Gorgias, maybe Socrates is saying this lover who brought you to Gorgias is a dunce. He's ignorant. So this teacher might have been a fool because you weren't attracted by wisdom. He said, hey, look, fell in love with wisdom as these people do. Did they? Or have they fallen in love with appearances? Handsomeness is to do with appearances. Did they really, the people who've embraced Gorgias, are they really in love with wisdom or appearances? If so, why did he pick handsome, rich, and noble instead of wise? Puzzles upon puzzles upon puzzles. Can you see how amazing Socrates is? What a genius he is. Or maybe he isn't a genius. That's a question. He says he knows nothing. If he doesn't have excellence and he seems to be functioning in an excellent way, where does excellence lie? Maybe it isn't in Socrates, but it's there. This is a big one. He's saying it's not me, I'm in need, but then he's doing it. What the heck is going on? Where does excellence lie then? If he seems to be demonstrating it, but he's not owning it. And do you see how awesome this guy is? And why we need to pick up where we left off? And why it's the greatest game in town. The best game, the noblest game, the only game in town really. And why we could come to the conclusion, hey, this sort of puzzle might be the answer to that second question that makes us rational. Where did we come from? What are we doing here? And where are we going? What are we doing here? This, it seems. Maybe. Whoa. And it started off with some amazing puzzles. So, Christopher Nolan, get in the back of the bus. Oh, maybe that's not a good expression to use. Take a back seat. Sit at the back of the class. This guy is going to school you a little bit. Let's see where he goes. On that cliffhanger, on that trailer, on that teaser. I hope to see you next time. I hope you're wondering. I hope you're puzzled yourself. Oh, so many here to be puzzled about. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for joining in chat. If you want to follow along in chat, you can follow along on Twitch. There should be a link below. You can join the Discord for notifications when we go live and to share questions. We have amazing discussions going on there. Really exciting stuff. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Support on Patreon if you like. Very greatly appreciated if you do. And I hope to see you next week. Oh, hey, if this has got you puzzled, share in the comments. What was it like being puzzled by this and going about your day or going about your week? Did it do anything for you? Because we're not just defining it, we're seeing if it affects us. It should be meaningful, not just definition, but demonstration. Right? What was the analogy? Meno. He pointed to him personally. So hey, share what has personally happened to you if you were bitten by any of these questions, if you got puzzled. Because this is not a one-person game. Philosophy is a team sport. No, okay, we just had to go at team sport thinking. It's a multi-person game. It's to be shared with your friends.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So, share in the comments or on Discord. And yeah, I'm very curious to see how it goes for you. And I'll see you next time.